Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Refugee Welcome Collective Lunch and Learn series. In these sessions, we aim to bring interesting and timely information to you, supporters of refugees. Whether you're a volunteer, community sponsor, resettlement agency staff, a local advocate, or just someone who's interested in learning more. We hope that you enjoy today's session, which is Deep Dive, the first 2 weeks after arrival, core services. Refugee Welcome Collective collaborates with partners to provide in-depth training programs, weekly weekly learning sessions, resources, and on-demand technical assistance for sponsors, practitioners, resettlement services, refugees paired with sponsors, community and institutional partners, and others to support quality community sponsorship programs across the United States. Some housekeeping stuff here. As a reminder for everyone joining the call today, there is a control panel in your upper right-hand corner that will allow you to submit questions through the questions box. There will be ample time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. Everyone on today's webinar is automatically muted. However, if you have any tech issues, please raise your hand through the control panel or submit a question in the questions box so that we can try to assist you. Additionally, the presentation, any resources, and a recording will be sent to everyone following today's webinar. And this brings us to our presenter for today. Our presenter is myself. My name is Derek Feldman, and I am the Senior Community Sponsorship Technical Assistance Associate with Refugee Welcome Collective. We can go ahead to the next slide, please. So this is sort of part two. We were off last week, but the week before that, we focused on core services involved in sort of the pre-arrival and the sort of day of arrival. And so now we're going to look at that, still pretty intensive portion of resettlement, which is that sort of first 2 weeks after arrival. Our objectives for today, similar to last time, to learn about resettlement core services that are this time associated specifically with those first 2 weeks after arrival, to understand some common strategies for collaboration between sponsor groups and agency staff. We'll see that there is sort of a wide range of possibilities in terms of working collaboratively with between a local resettlement service agency and a co-sponsor group or support team or volunteers in terms of who might be responsible for what specific activities. We'll talk in more depth about that. And then to just generally become more familiar with other potential wraparound services. These are not considered core services, but they are still important services that are generally completed, or at least you can start thinking about them during that sort of intensive period, that first 2 weeks after arrival. Go ahead to the next slide, please. And again, similar to the previous presentation where I focused on the day of arrival, let's do kind of a level set so that we're all kind of thinking about this in the same sort of way. Today, we're going to learn some general principles and examples focused on those first 2 weeks after arrival. But really, I just want to re-emphasize that resettlement happens in diverse ways with different local contexts. So just let's acknowledge that it's done a little bit differently depending on your local context. Always refer to policies, procedures, and guidance from the partnered agency. So if you are a sponsor, a potential sponsor, a volunteer, a welcome group of some kind, always refer to the policies and procedures and guidance from the agency that you are partnered with to provide these services. Also, just want to again sort of center ourselves in an understanding that we provide all of these services, these refugee resettlement core services and wraparound services, with being informed by cultural humility, a recognition of sort of power and privilege in the work that we're doing, and always an eye towards empowering clients, respecting their self-agency to make their own decisions, and in the end also to to, empower clients towards their own self-sufficiency, where they can have, wages, earned income, other supports that allow them to support themselves and their families in the long term. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Okay, so diving in, the first core service is the next day home visit. I want to emphasize that this tends to be one that agency staff usually do, or at least want to be involved in some way. It doesn't have to be that way. Community sponsored groups can do this. But again, look for guidance and support from the local agency that you're working with to determine, in what ways the agency staff might participate in this next day home visit. In what ways will the sponsor group be doing this? Perhaps they'll be doing it together. There are lots of different sort of a spectrum of possibilities there. So just want to recognize that. But the staff or the sponsor group will be there. One important part of the next day home visit really is to kind of make sure that there's a calendar, and especially, and I'll bring up the calendar a couple of times because I think it's really important that clients understand what is going to happen over the next 2 weeks. And this first 2 weeks is kind of the most intensive. It's the most sort of, a lot of stuff is happening, and certainly in American culture, being on time, for those appointments, specific appointments, especially with doctor's visits or other sort of agency meetings and things like that. It's important to be there, to be on time, that everyone knows. So that people can think about, well, how am I going to get there, and what needs to take place in order for me to be on time to this appointment or something like that. So calendar is really important to just think through, okay, is there going to be some sort of shared calendar? Is there going to be a calendar that's going to be, with a magnet on the refrigerator? Make sure that there's an interpreter or perhaps translation so that clients, can understand what that calendar means and what it says and what the appointment is and when it is, and perhaps contact information for who might be providing transportation or things like that. Okay, so that is one important part of it. The second one is really kind of a double check on the day of arrival. We did the home safety check, and this is sort of a double check of that to make sure that the clients understand how to use their thermostat, how to turn it up, how to turn it down, how to turn it off, that kind of thing, how to use the oven and stove, how to turn it on, increase the heat, lower the heat, turn it off. These might be things that they're unfamiliar with, so making sure that they really understand how to use it, how to turn it on, turn it off, that kind of thing. Same with hot water, how to access that hot water, how to turn it hotter, how to turn it colder, both bath and shower, and also with sinks and things like that. Doors and windows, how to lock the door, how to use the key to unlock the door. If there are latches, if there are any other latches next to windows or anything like that, any other safety issues, make sure that clients understand how to do that. Make sure that clients understand where the fire extinguisher is, how to use a fire extinguisher, what a smoke detector is, what it sounds like when it goes off, what to do if the smoke detector goes off and there's a fire in the house or apartment. Those kinds of things, really important basic skills and knowledge to be able to make sure that people feel safe in their homes, know how to use all of the appliances and things like that, and how to stay safe. You may also include things like emergency contact information. So perhaps there's a list that has been posted on the refrigerator of, 911, that's been explained with an interpreter, under what conditions, whether it's safety or fire or police or medical or something like that, how to call 911 in an emergency, what those emergencies look like. And perhaps, again, maybe it's their caseworker, their phone number, maybe it's the group leader or some, other member of the group. And so the clients have that cell phone number, that kind of thing. So that is the bulk of that next day home visit, again. And also the other one is sort of a basic needs check. Hopefully, again, the day of arrival, that's already happened with making sure that they have food and have all their basic needs like toiletries and other things like that. But this is another opportunity to check and to make sure that the family has enough food and can cook their own food in their own home, that kind of thing, that they have all the toiletries, they know how to utilize all the all the things in the house that they need to survive. So that is the next day home visit. Again, like I said, this can be done by the local agency staff. If that's the case, the sponsor group can participate in some way, whether they are, even just watching and participating and taking notes and thinking about, okay, how can we be better, to support this? How can we double check on this thing that, oh, they don't have towels, paper towels, whatever it is. Oh, okay, well, we'll make sure we'll go get that. Whatever things come up in that, this is just an opportunity for the sponsor group to participate in that. Or the sponsorship group can be trained by the local agency staff to complete this thing. There may be a form that might be able to be filled out as part of this that might include some questions to the client to make sure that the client understands how to fix their thermostat one way or the other, that they understand what the smoke detectors are, that kind of thing. It might be a questionnaire of sorts, making sure that they really do understand it. So, there might be some training involved in training that sponsor group to be able to do that. Okay, that's one. Let's go to the next core service. Now, sometimes, so this has to be done within the first 5 working days, and sometimes this is sort of combined. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it's a separate thing, sometimes it's the same thing as the next day home visit. But this is essentially, the intake into the reception and placement refugee resettlement program. And so that includes things like the client rights and grievance policy, so that clients understand that if they have concerns about something, if they feel like they've been mistreated or anything like that, that they understand the process of bringing that information to either the caseworker, and if there's a problem with the caseworker, to the supervisor, the case manager, if there's a problem with the case manager, to the executive director, if concerned about the entire agency itself, perhaps going up to the national level or something like that, that they have that understanding of what their rights are as a client and what the grievance policy is and how do they communicate any concerns that they may have. There might be paperwork like a release of information so that the agency staff can share that information with other agencies like benefits, local benefits offices, with health services, things like that. That's important paperwork that again is definitely done with an interpreter if an interpreter is needed. And this is the kind of thing that even with clients who have high levels of English, it may be that this is because this kind of gets technical and people are signing papers and things like that, that even if a client has high levels of English and normally doesn't need an interpreter, this might be one where, an interpreter still might be utilized. There's some general orientation and understanding about the refugee reception and placement program, the description of that program, a description of sort of cash assistance and what that might look like for this client, description of health assistance and public benefits and what kinds of benefits the client qualifies for, Again, this is one that tends to be more technical and tends to be led by agency staff. But again, like I said, it doesn't have to be. There's possibility of some collaboration here between the agency staff and the sponsor group, or the sponsor group can be trained on how to do this. Employment expectations, generally what are the, based on their experience, based on the job opportunities in the area, what are some likely expectations? What are expectations around work culture here in the United States? What are some expectations around long-term plans, what your first job might look like compared to perhaps what your second job or third job might look like, that kind of thing once you've been at that job for a while. What are some expectations and like what are the sort of logistical issues around ESL enrollment, some English language enrollment, school enrollment for kids that are school age, that kind of thing. So, and then again, I would say the calendar, making sure that the client understands, what these next couple of weeks worth of appointments might consist of, where they have to be, who's the contact person, what time might those appointments be, important dates, when things might happen. I encourage, this is another opportunity to talk about the calendar. Now, this intake interview, like I said, sometimes is done at the same time as the next day home visit, but also many times this might be done at the local office. So, there's 5 working days that we have to get this done. So it might be that there are enough other new arrivals, where that client might not be the only person, or that family might not be the only one in this sort of intake interview general orientation. It might be that there are 3 or 4, cases or families that might be given this sort of general orientation together to save time and staff resources and that kind of thing. So they might all go to the office on a particular day to receive this information. Sometimes it's just a one-on-one thing. Sometimes it's a bit of a group session, depending on how many new arrivals and the availability of the staff and things like that. Okay, let's go to the next core service. So next one is an application for SNAP benefits, and this is required to be done within 7 working days of arrival. And this is an important one. SNAP benefits, for anyone who's not familiar, it just stands for a Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or sometimes you perhaps have heard like food stamps or something like that. But that's what this is. It's administered through the USDA and then through the state's benefits office. And so you can go to the USDA website for a directory. So there's a state directory of online applications or local offices. So sometimes you can do it online, depending on the state that you live in. Sometimes you have to go to the local office. But you can at least go to that website. There's a SNAP state directory of resources, and you can go there for more information. Again, each local context is a little bit different, so ask and make sure that you're collaborating with that local office who might have some insight into the specific details of what you might need to do there in that community. It is state administered, but in some places it can sometimes be like county specific in terms of where exactly you register and how you might do that. It may require an appointment at a local office, at a local benefits office. You may need to apply for other public benefits at the same time. So, and again, like I said, each state is different, and sort of how it's administered is slightly different for each state. But sometimes, you'll do that in the process of applying for other public benefits potentially. But then once that client has applied for the SNAP benefits, eventually they will receive a SNAP benefit card that sort of looks like and acts very similar to like a debit card. There usually are some steps to setting it up and establishing a PIN number. And then, so the sponsor group certainly can help clients in learning how to utilize their SNAP benefits card, how to set it up, how to set the PIN number, how to check their balance, what stores they can use those SNAP benefits on, what types of food and things like that you can use it for, what items you can't use it for, what stores take it, how to look for that SNAP logo to know, what stores and what items you can purchase. They can do things like check with their local farmers market too. Some local farmers markets have things like double dollars, where if you use your SNAP card, you get sort of you can double your dollars in value, and if you end up spending that on local produce. So these are, all kinds of different possibilities that sponsor groups can help with and get clients familiar with their community and how to utilize those benefits. We will, in a follow-up email to everyone, I'll include some of these helpful links so that you know where to go, like that state directory of resources, also the sort of eligibility and some other information about SNAP benefits. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Application for medical assistance is another core service that's done, again, within that first 7 working days after arrival. Refugees are eligible for Medicaid, and they technically are eligible upon when they first arrive. So actually when they apply, they essentially sort of backdate. So if for some reason there was some sort of emergency that actually happened the first day of arrival before they actually got their medical card and Medicaid card and had actually technically they haven't applied yet, it would sort of be backdated and that service would be covered for refugees. But anyway, they apply through the state agency. And I'll include this link as well in the follow-up, which is sort of beneficiary resources through Medicaid, where to go and that kind of thing. And again, this is state administered. So each state and sometimes even each county is a little bit different in terms of how to technically apply for medical assistance or to receive Medicaid. The sponsor group, if they're participating in this, and again, this ranges in terms of whether the staff tends to do this kind of stuff or if sponsors do this. Sponsors can be trained to do this, but they're not necessarily at all places. Yeah, so one of the things that needs to be done is that the application itself, the paperwork needs to be saved and kept in a case management system of some kind or given to the agency for safekeeping and for proof that the application was completed within that 7 days. So even if they are not given a Medicaid card right away, at least they have proof of that application, that the application was completed at that time. Eventually, they'll receive a Medicaid card, usually in the mail, within a week or 2. So if there is any setup or anything like that that's required with that, obviously a sponsor group can help with that. They can look on the back of the card, call the 1-800 number or anything like that. If there's a setup involved, most of the time there's not, but perhaps if there is. And then again, this is one of those things that it may be that you're doing this at the same time as like the SNAP benefits, as well as the Medicaid. So you're sort of applying for a host potentially of public benefits all at the same time. So that may happen all together. It may happen separately. It just depends on the state. Let's go ahead to the next slide. There's also an application for cash assistance. And again, this has to be done within the first 7 working days. This, refugees are eligible for something called refugee cash assistance. And this is a state, through the state benefits office, or potentially through the local resettlement agency. So this is one of those that is, it is administered through the state, and it may be different at each state. It may be different in each community where resettlement is happening. Sometimes they can, this process will be done at the state benefits office. Sometimes it will be done, it's being done at the local resettlement agency, perhaps. So again, each state is different. You do have to, look into, do a little bit of research yourself or through the local agency to understand exactly how this works in your community. They may qualify for refugee cash assistance. Sometimes they may also qualify for TANF, or temporary assistance for needy families. I'll have that link as well. It does take some thinking through and some experience in terms of which might be better, or for what families refugee cash assistance might be beneficial compared to a little bit, because refugee cash assistance is not for very long. There are also potentially some other cash assistance that the clients may qualify for in different states. Again, every state is different. I'll just keep trying to reiterate that. There may be other cash assistance programs, but for refugee cash assistance, that is temporary and more temporary than TANF, for example. So it's usually less than a year. I think it's 10 months. That may have changed, or sometimes it's been extended for longer. Maybe 8 months actually. Anyway, either way, but TANF can last for a few years. I think it's at least 3, it's possibly 5 years. But it's less. So, there are all kinds of issues there. And I don't want to kind of get too far into the weeds, but I would say, certainly work with or collaborate or learn from the local agency if they have some good guidance in terms of, what families, what sort of systems what cash assistance might work best for different families, because they can't do both. There may also be in some states, and again, this may have changed as well. So perhaps in some states it's not happening anymore, but there was, at least at one point, some differential. So like if they qualified for TANF, but that money was less than what they would have received with refugee cash assistance, that there's a differential that could be paid to them. So they would still receive TANF and then an additional amount, a differential amount on top of that, that sort of covers that for 8 months or 10 months, where they would have received cash assistance and it would have been more. It gets complicated there. I don't want to kind of scare anyone with how kind of complicated this gets, but these are the issues that come into play here. And so again, strongly recommend working with a local agency, having that sort of insight in terms of what might work best for clients, based on how many employable adults, how many kids, that kind of thing. The size of the family might affect those different calculations differently. And then again, applying for cash assistance may also need to take place while applying for other public benefits at that same time. Let's go on to the next slide. The application for a Social Security card is also one of those core services. There is a move to have refugees apply for Social Security cards before arrival. So that may be happening 100% now. It may, in some cases, may not yet. So there may be some opportunities for sponsors to also help with this process of applying at the local Social Security office. I'll provide these links on how to do that. But at very least, even if they have actually applied for that Social Security card overseas before arrival, but they still have not received that after the first week or by the end of the second week, you may need to help check the application or appeal status. I'll include that link in the follow-up email so that you have that. So that's a possibility, is that even if they have applied for that Social Security card overseas, it still hasn't arrived, and so you might need to help with that application check to see whether or not they have the right address and that kind of thing. Let's go on to the next. And the address brings me to another core service, which is the filing an AR11 or the change of address form, and that needs to be completed within the first 10 calendar days. All non-citizens in the United States must report a change of address to USCIS within 10 days of moving. And so that is for the first home, their first apartment. If they move into a temporary home, so perhaps they're staying at a hotel or staying at an Airbnb for a short period of time while their more permanent living arrangements are still being fixed and established. If they're staying in a hotel for first 2 weeks or whatever it is, that needs to be completed. This AR11 form needs to be completed when they first arrive. So they're and then done again for a second time when they've moved into their more permanent residence. So this is something that sponsors certainly can help with. Sometimes this is the local agency that will do this, but it is a fairly simple form, straightforward to fill out. I will have that direct link. You can Google it, but I'll have that direct link for you. You do have to set up a login, ID information with the USCIS on their website, but it's a fairly easy process, and then you can complete that AR11. And that has to be done for all immigrants, all non-citizens in the United States. Go ahead to the next slide. So those were the specific core services that are required within that first 2 weeks. As you can see, it's a lot of stuff, and they tend to be sort of technical in what they are. But there are lots of opportunities for collaboration between staff and sponsor groups. Even if those sponsor groups are just supporting, perhaps they're providing transportation to the clients to get to that local benefits office. Perhaps they're, taking the family there and hanging out in the waiting room with the kids, so the parents can go in the back with an interpreter on the phone, fill out all the paperwork and stuff like that they may need to fill out. So lots of ways for collaboration there. There are some additional wraparound services that tend to take place during this important sort of intensive 2-week time after arrival. And so these are not considered core services, but they are important nonetheless, important to clients' well-being, and to that it's helpful to staff for community sponsor groups to take this kind of stuff on, because we know that this can be really helpful. And so if the sponsor group can take this on, then the staff member doesn't have to do that. They can focus on some other thing like paperwork and things like that. So one of those is providing some skill building for taking public transportation. So now let's dive into this for a second. Sponsors themselves often aren't all that familiar sometimes with public transportation, how to take the bus. So I strongly encourage community members, community sponsor groups to learn that process. How do you buy a bus ticket? How much is a bus ride? Where are the bus stops? Where is the transport hub which direction are you going, and then how do you get off at that transport hub and then get on a different line and go a different direction. Where's the stop that's closest to their home going into town and then coming out from town to their neighborhood or something like that. All of that information, as you can imagine, are sort of steps. How do you buy the bus pass? Learning where the bus stops are. How do you use the bus pass? How do you tell the bus driver that you're getting off at the next stop? How to use an app, perhaps, in terms of figuring out what line you're supposed to get on. All of that takes some time and some skill, and that's something that absolutely during that first 2 weeks, the first time it might be just driving the clients around and showing them where the spots are, showing them where the hub is, walking up there and then learning where the signs are, things like that. The next time they might go with them, they might travel with them, be on the bus with them, and they stop the bus at the right time and show them and kind of point out, oh, that building right there, it's right after that, it's the next block after you see that building there, that's where we're going to get off, right? That kind of stuff. And then by the end of that second week, perhaps the client is ready to do that on their own, and they say, oh yeah, I remember, I know how to do this with my card, and I know where to get off at. And then they can always call the sponsor, if they get lost, they got off at the wrong place, can you please come pick me up, I got off at the wrong place, I didn't do it right. No problem, we all make mistakes, and this is how we learn. It's how we learn the process. So sort of building all of that. That's a really important one. Taking public transportation, gives people a sense of really some control over their own lives about when they're going to go to the grocery store, when, how to get out and go do things on their own, and really important towards self-sufficiency. The sponsor group can help create a calendar of important dates and appointments. I've talked about the calendar a couple of times, strongly encourage that. They can help label household items in the client's native language and in English. So this is refrigerator, and this is cabinet, and this is rice, and this is, all of these English words that they might use regularly is one way to pick up the language, is to see it, and they're interacting with it every day. Provide toys and entertainment and games and exercise is really important. Where's the closest park? Where can everyone safely, walk to? Perhaps they can walk to a convenience store or another store that's really needed, or a park or something like that they need, that they can play soccer, football, or anything like that. Really important stuff to feel like it's safe to navigate in their neighborhood and to come back home, and so to get out and to feel not so bored and just stuck at home. They can be a community guide. Where's the library? How do they get a library card? Where's the closest park, or where's the mailbox to send things? How to send a letter or package or something like that. All of these sort of things are really important in terms of getting a feel for your community and feeling a part of that community, and that you know how to do things and where things are. And then obviously just practicing English through conversation, just the attempts at talking and pointing things out, and sometimes smiling and sometimes grimacing, and all of those kind of nonverbal things, as well as trying to put English words to that. It's the give and take of communication and those sort of aha moments of recognizing something and both being in agreement about what that thing is, that people pick up the language. And so that's an important part of it. It's just hanging out, getting to know people, and just practicing talking and communicating with each other. So these are some of the important other wraparound services that sponsors can do, especially during that first 2 weeks, which tends to be the most sort of intensive time of resettlement and the bulk of sort of that volunteer hours and work, because there's just a lot of stuff that has to be done in that. Let's go ahead to the next slide. And we'll open it up for questions. Please you know, I do see that there might be a question or two in the questions box already, so appreciate that. And yeah, as a reminder, we still have a few minutes to submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. And I will go to that now. Oops. Great, so this first question is, can a client apply for refugee cash assistance and TANF? So they cannot have both at the same time. But sometimes, like I said, in some states, there are sort of differentials. So they can apply for TANF, which is a little bit more long-term, and then get the differential between the TANF and what they would have gotten with refugee cash assistance, which might have been more, at least over that whatever like time period that they're able to do that. And that's just, and that was the case. It might not be. Sometimes it changes and it's not available anymore in some places. So, but yeah, it is one or the other. And sometimes there's, you know, it might work where refugee cash assistance might be more beneficial while they are eligible for refugee cash assistance, and then when they're no longer eligible for refugee cash assistance, that they may then be eligible for TANF at that time, which may then last longer going forward. So, so yeah, good questions. And if anyone else, I don't see any other questions in the questions tab, but if anyone, if you have a minute, we've got just a couple of minutes here. If anyone would like to add anything or have any questions about it, happy to be here and to clarify anything or to add any additional information. Wait just a minute, see. While we're just waiting another minute, just in case anyone has any additional questions, Grace, if you could go to the next slide and go ahead and pop in that JOT form into the chat as well. Just wanted to say to everyone that this is an opportunity to provide us some feedback on what you're getting out of these Lunch and Learn series. And you know, how are they going? Are you know, what's working for you? How can we improve on anything in terms of information or in terms of format to get you this information, as well as any recommendations that you have in terms of specific issues or specific potential speakers that you would like to hear, or any topics of interest. We always love to hear about what you might be interested in, so we can go find some speakers that can attest or, you know, speak on those specific topics, or that we can, you know, grow our own knowledge and understanding so that we can talk to you all about that. Let's see. Okay. Someone's saying they can't see anything in the chat. So there should be another, so there's the questions pane, but then there's also like a chat pane. Oh, yeah, I'm not seeing anything either. Grace, can you try to put that in the chat again? It is this QR code, like, so if you have your phone, you can just kind of QR code, you know, take a picture of it and it'll take you to it. But usually we have a link as well, but perhaps that's not working in the chat. Oh, okay, I'm seeing it now. So hope other people can see that as well. And if we don't have any other questions, just want to say thanks to everyone for being here and for attending today's RWC Lunch and Learn. You will receive a follow-up email with a link to view the recording of today's webinar, and you can share that with others. And I just wanted to say, on behalf of Refugee Welcome Collective, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. We'll see you all next week.